PoE 2 has changed a lot over the years, so more than 5 years of development now. And what was that initial pitch when PoE 2 was first put forwards, like, as to what it's going to be? Because it was much smaller in scope originally.
Yeah, so when we started, it wasn't even a sequel. It was just we're just updating the character rigs, and over time, it kind of feature creeped into a proper sequel. But the thing that we were saying is, whenever we were talking about it, and I guess this is the main thing, is that we're like, okay, when we make an area here, it needs to be that there's like a theme for it. It feels unique from everything else. We're not going to just like have recycled stuff like within the campaign that just feels like, oh, we just took this area and modified it slightly. Each one's got to have its own stuff. It's got to have monsters that were like carefully thought about that like, fit in with the world. And it's got to have bosses that are actually like good tier quality, and every area is going to have one. So those decisions have kind of been things that have meant that they really raised the quality bar to a level that took us way longer than we even really expected. Like those things there, just like it's huge, right? Like honestly, I feel like we underestimated significantly what it would take to deliver that level of quality.
I remember really early on, a battle I fought for, and I mean like way back, was like, if you think back to, say, Diablo 2, which obviously still holds a lot of, power in terms of design motivations and philosophy and stuff within the company. You get things like the super uniques, and PoE 1 did them, and it's just like, here's a boss with 1 or 2 skills. And I remember very, very, very early on in PoE 2, I'm like, I want every single boss to be memorable and a thing. I don't want a unique monster that's just like dies in 2 seconds and uses heavy strike and has a fancy name.
So we saw a cinematic, to put it lightly. It was that was quite epic, and I know has been cooking for quite some time. And that was pretty exciting, but we've also seen just a lot of story stuff happening on a much higher level than previously now. So stepping up your storytelling game here a bit. Yeah,
so we're really wanting to make sure that the storytelling in PoE 2 is much better than what it was in PoE 1. There's a lot more kind of, that kind of like stuff with the introductions to boss fights and the outros and things like that, like all that stuff. We've just got a lot more storytelling going in. All of those things. We do have the intro cutscene. There's also kind of like light, like between the acts. There's these kind of like more kind of motion graphic type cutscenes, just kind of establish things. And there might be some more surprises later on in the game as well. Not in early access, unfortunately. Later on that we can see as well. But ultimately, we just want to make sure that I think a lot of people who got through the PoE 1 story had no idea what was happening by the end. Effectively, we want to make sure that is not the case this time around, that people really are able to absorb things. But
guilty.
One thing I will say, though, is that it's ultra important to us that we don't break the feeling that, like, when you're playing a second time, that it feels like we don't want it to feel annoying the second time.
Yeah, we were talking about this morning. About you don't take the control out of the player's
exactly.
hands.
So yeah, I'm personally a believer of the fact that if you just change, when you change the camera position for a cutscene, immediately it feels way more annoying, like, because there's this whole thing of like if you click on an NPC and like the camera changes position, like sure, when you're playing through the campaign the first time, that kind of thing is like, like that can be cool, but then if you're like you're playing through the second, third, fourth, fifth time, you want to just be able to go to the NPC and go click, 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 and just get past, and without it feeling like you've had to sort of worry about anything. So like effectively, we want to make sure that it's still that we still have that, because ultimately, we're a game you expect people to play through many times. So ideally, we can kind of deliver both the situation where the first time you play through it, it feels like an amazing story that you're getting, that you're taking seriously, that you're understanding, that there's like all those sort of touch points and little things just all through, while also maintaining the fact that if you know what you're doing, it's like you don't have to go talk to some quest giver just to get a quest. Like you can just go do the thing, without having to talk to someone about it first. That kind of stuff is really important, just to make that stuff work well when you know what you're doing.
All right. So we've got this 1 in 4 maps is boss maps, and then that means the other 3 are not boss maps.
Yes.
What does a non-boss map look like? How do you win it?
So effectively, what you need to do is kill the rares in the map to remove the corruption and finish it. Once you get down below 50 monsters, it will point out any rares that are remaining. They'll like a marker, just so you know.
I was worried about that.
Honestly, I wouldn't expect that to even be necessary most of the time, because the layouts are kind of designed so that if you generally speaking, you want to clear the maps to find the rares anyway, because those are the one those have good drops, and effectively the only reason that you would need that marker thing is just occasionally you get some slightly weird degenerate layout where there's some side bit you didn't notice or something like that, and then that's where you have to go. So generally speaking, you'll be able to make your way around and kill them all.
The goal of the player is you're cleansing corruption from the world, you're bringing
Right.
order back, stuff like that. So you even get the thing on the map where you're like, if there's some corruption-y looking stuff around the map, when you complete the map, that gets purged away. So you feel like you're reverse painting the map a little bit. And
we're
you're
cleaning up.
It can actually be quite satisfying as you're like changing all the nodes from one color to another, and you're like, this is fun. I'm like,
But ultimately, what we wanted to do is we wanted boss combat in PoE 2 to matter when we have it.
Yeah.
And so in order, like if you have a map boss every area, then if we made it so the boss combat mattered enough, like in order to actually balance it that way,
stressful.
It's too much. Like it actually is like, you spend too much of your time fighting bosses.
Yeah.
So effectively, if that's what you want to do now, you can do it because there's bosses there. Like when I say 1 in 4 maps is a map boss, that doesn't mean that 1 in 4 maps you play is one. Because, obviously you can pick what content you're doing by exploring
you can
around.
chain
You're
the map
picking your
boss.
pathing and your path.
Exactly. So effectively, if you want to hunt the bosses, then that is the thing you can do. If you want to just like do some mindless grinding for a while, you can do that too. And what it means is we can actually make the bosses way more rewarding. They can drop way more items than they were going to because of the fact that there's not one at the end of every area, right? Like we can actually, and the fight is substantial. You get a lot of drops.
Will there be a penalty for individual party member dying when grouping up for bosses on that note then? It seems weird that the boss straight up resets when playing solo, but when playing in a group, nothing happens if a party member dies.
So tell us about the rules
Yeah,
now
how
that we
does that
have, because
work?
I know you've changed them recently.
So bosses are obviously harder for having more people.
Yep.
Less crowd controls, things like obviously more life, and I'm not just saying double life, more than double life, right? It does get more than twice as hard, or more than in players as hard. So yes, you could argue, okay, we have reviving as an advantage. Well, yes, it does. It does take time to revive, and if your friend dies early and you're unable to revive them because you're constantly being interrupted, well,
From what I saw, it's pretty hard to
you're
pull
not
off unless
having
you,
a fun time.
Get a big stun or something.
Another change that we made recently is, of course, for each revived, between each set of checkpoints, every time you have to revive them, the revive takes longer subsequent times.
So that's important because it just means that if you're like, you can't revive spam anymore because it's going to take longer and longer each time. But then when you go to a checkpoint, that resets. So like you're back to normal
Now,
again. So,
in in-game maps, you cannot revive each other. Death is a consequence.
Yeah. I was
and
going to
then-
ask actually about like endgame maps and what is the rule for dying in endgame map? Is it 1 portal deal now, not 6 portals?
well, you still have 6 portals, so you can have your party members, but death.
You-
Alright.
And you can leave and come back as
Yeah,
long
yeah.
as you don't
Okay.
die.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you can take items out, but
Okay.
a death will end that map for you.
Yeah. Do you guys have a recommendation of what is the best class to play in the beta?
I mean, that's a very hard one. Honestly, like so.
There's so many choices now.
There are. So let me. Well, okay. If we're going by the numbers, if we go by player satisfaction reports on per class, we break it down from the betas.
this is good technical information here.
Then that means the monk is very interesting because the monk is the class that dies the most often. But it's
Yeah.
also the class that when people play it, they have the highest satisfaction
That's
level by a very,
fascinating.
very tiny margin that compares to the others.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it is like glass cannon, like it's very fast, but you have to,
Yeah.
you
I
have
mean,
to retreat and move in and out. So,
I fell in love with the monk
that's,
playing it. It looks like it's gotten a little better.
yeah,
even,
yeah, that's
so.
interesting. But I think if you're a new player, then the mercenary, if you're like used to shooters and stuff, I think playing the mercenary could be a good win. Like I really love that class. It's
I don't
really
know.
cool.
I've been loving the mercenary,
Yeah.
but to me, it feels like you need to really be considering each engagement a lot more. It's a bit more
Maybe.
tactical.
Maybe,
and
I don't know. Like
considered.
I like it.
You don't have that
I really
ability
like
to
that.
correct if you
But
make a mistake.
honestly, like I mean, I go through favorite classes all the time. Whenever I change to play a different class, it becomes my favorite.
That's my current favorite.
So
playing.
it's just whatever I'm playing tends to be the thing. So yeah, right now I'm doing a mercenary playthrough, so that's probably why I'm into that. But yeah, it's I'm not sure if you've got a similar.
No, you were talking about the numbers as well. It was interesting that monk and then warrior had the highest
Yes,
satisfaction levels.
Warrior's
and I was
next,
like,
by the way, technically, if you're looking for.
that's pretty good.
Thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the Q&A.